things that she's going through, and I don't want to take too much of her time, but she does feed off your energy, so please give her a lot of energy. Please ask questions. She's going to hype you up. We want to make sure that you all leave here with something, so that's why you have that blue scratch of paper so that you can write notes. And then as she's telling her story, she has that yellow paper where she'll give you more information on what she wants you to do with it. But if you guys can please give a round of applause to Dr. Peña.
So, good morning. I have a problem. I don't know how to stand still. So I've been told I can use a clicker and a wireless mic. So I hope you're going to be okay if I move around in the front. Is that okay? Yes? All right. So I'm going to grab this mic. Okay. And see if it works. And say once again, good morning. Welcome to the Power of Story series. And it's a little ironic, but today's topic is the power of story in the Power of Story series. And the power of story in my life, specifically, we were looking at my professional journey and looking at how my passion for stories created those small steps that led me to be here today as your Dean of Faculty here. I was going to say at this podium, but here in front of all of you. But it's also going to be a little personal because in creating this presentation, I realized I can't really separate the personal journey from the professional because my power of story for myself and my passion for stories also created a lot of steps in my personal journey, and my personal journey fueled my professional journey. And you'll know what I mean in a bit. So the other thing is, as we hear this presentation today, and we go through some, you're going to see pictures of baby pictures, family pictures. Are you ready for pictures? Yeah? I don't show these pictures to anyone, so get ready. There are going to be some hidden themes in this talk today. And so because the teacher in me doesn't want you to sit there bored, you have a yellow worksheet. Yay, yay, okay. And in the yellow worksheet, there are 3 columns. So while I'm talking today, in the first column, I want you to write the themes that you see pop up. Can you give me an example of a theme that you think is already in this presentation?
I gave it a name. Family, the power of family could be a theme.
So as you see pop up, I want you to write it in that column. The middle column is about lessons learned, my lessons. What lessons do you think I learned as you hear the presentation? And the last column is about your lessons learned. As you hear this presentation, what are you learning for yourselves? What are you getting out of this? And this process for me is a learning process. I learned a lot doing this presentation. But what I'm going to ask you to do is to write what you're comfortable sharing on the yellow sheet because I want to collect it at the end. I want to learn from your perspective new things from this presentation. If you have something personal that you don't want to share with me, that's okay. Guess what the green sheet is for? The stuff that you don't want to share with me so that you can take it home with you. Are we okay so far? Yes? I don't hear you. Okay, thank you. And so just a little map. We're going to talk about my passion for stories, where that started, how that developed, how that led me to choose an academic pathway, a career pathway, and how that opened multiple professional doors for me. So let's start this journey. And the only way to start is by going to the very beginning. That's my mom in the picture, by the way. Let's go to the very beginning, the story of my parents. So my parents are from 2 villages in La Vega in the Dominican Republic. My mom is from a village called La Torre. The Torre, when I was small, had dirt roads, no running water, no electricity, no indoor plumbing. If you had to use the bathroom, guess what? You went up a hill to an outhouse, okay? When you cooked, guess what? You got wood from the back and you made a fire outside in a stove. And my mom grew up in what you might say, my God, that's extreme poverty. But believe it or not, that was a better condition than the one she was born in. My mom and her siblings were actually raised by other families because her biological parents were even poorer and couldn't really take care of the kids. So, I know. And actually it's very common. So they were raised by families who could give them food, shelter, clothes, and education. There were schools in these villages. But my mom swore that she wasn't going to raise a family there, so she got married. She said, I'm going to the U.S., I'm going to become a citizen, And my children will be born in the US as American citizens. And so I was born in 1978, the year that the first female astronauts were hired by NASA, the year that Grease came out. Anyone know Grease? Go Grease Lightning. I love that movie, right? And the year of Garfield came out. My ex-husband loves Garfield. And my mom did everything she could to create a very happy home. And that's my mom, and you can see my dad for my 4th birthday. She did her best to create a happy home, and you're going to notice a theme. We're rarely together in the pictures. You'll see why soon. But she wanted a happy family. I was always a grumpy girl. I hated dresses. I hated pink. I hated flowers. I hated pictures. I hated it all. She really wanted a girly girl, but she was pregnant there with my brother, so she got a boy at least at some point who would make her a little happier. And we grew up in the Bronx. I was born in the Bronx. And after Bronx, I hear, woo, yeah, New York. And I was born in Hutts Point, and then we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment on the 4th floor. It looks just like this. And the 4 train was parallel to our apartment. The 4 train runs every 10 minutes. And it was in this apartment that I got my introduction to stories. It was in this apartment that my mom would sing me nursery rhymes from her country. And this was in Spanish, but it's about, I don't get this now as I look back. A dessert of rice and milk falls in love with a young girl from the capital. I love you, yes. I love you, no. I'm not quite sure why these were nursery rhymes, but that's okay. This is what I grew up with. And then she got me my first television set. So she got a black and white television from someone at her job. My parents worked at Lord & Taylor's. My mom worked in the kitchen of the cafe. My dad did maintenance in Lord & Taylor's. I used to spend my days off from school running up the escalator, hiding behind the clothing rack, and eating hot-fresh sundaes with Roberto and Gloria in the cafeteria. They would sneak me in the kitchen. And then she got me my first set of books. My mom couldn't read in English. We didn't know anyone who could read in English. And I couldn't read yet. But she knew the importance of literacy at home and developing those early habits, and she got me Dr. Seuss books. And then she got me my first computer. We got the joke? We got the joke? So there were no home computers yet, but she got me a typewriter from a coworker. And she really was trying to build this notion of positive literacy habits at home. She couldn't read for me, she couldn't help me with homework, but she could at least give me the tools to be able to do that for myself. The challenge was, with all these tools, something started happening. It's an interesting story of life, right? You have a family, they're alone in the US, they're trying to build a life. There are a lot of pressures, there are a lot of challenges. There were times when we looked like this. Most times we didn't look like that. Because along with the challenges, something was happening at home. I had a loving father and a loving mother, but there was something going on with my father. Have you ever heard about Jekyll and Hyde? That's how I'm picturing this, right? You grow up with one person, maybe it's Dr. Jekyll, but sometimes something changes and Mr. Edward Hyde comes out, right? In our immigration story, that would be alcohol. So my personal journey is going to talk about addiction in the family. And in this case, we had a lot of fun years. We had some difficult years. But that Jekyll there would become Hyde sometimes. And it was through these stories that I created a new pattern. When Hyde would come out, I would hide under my covers with my stories and create my own world. And little did I know that what was happening was a pattern where in my life, during these years, I would hide through stories, survive through stories, reflect, and as I got older, I would learn and grow. We got too serious, right? You got really quiet. You're okay? Yeah? All right. So let's talk about that hiding part. So what happened was I loved stories. Do you love stories? Hearing them, reading them, right? And I became the geek that collected my coins, not to buy toys or food, but to buy books, all kinds of books. And then we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment. We were 8 people. 5 of us were under the age of 18. And if you look here, do you know what this is? This was our Google. All right. So whenever I read something exciting and I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? I would go to Encyclopedia Britannica. And this was our Google. And so what we would do all these years was doing a lot of reading, looking up things we wanted to know, hiding in the stories. When things got tough at home, when Hyde would come out a little bit, right? Hiding under the covers with my books. And if you look here, this is when we were at the 2-bedroom apartment. That's my little brother. He doesn't know he's in this presentation. Don't tell him, he's coming this weekend. And from that transition to the next one, we went through a lot of things. My dad lost everything. My parents got separated. Then he got shot. Then I call that the bullet that brought my parents together, because then they got back together. Then we moved to another apartment, and we really tried to make a happy family. We did our best. But as we transitioned, we would have the sober years and the not so sober years. But that was okay. It was a transition we were going to go through. This is in the Dominican Republic and the beach. I love the beach, by the way. So what happened was, as we went through those years, I started creating stories. It wasn't enough to read them. How many of you love to write? Right, wow. It wasn't, so just like you, it wasn't enough to read the stories. I had to create them. But it got kind of cheesy. Are you ready? I would watch a movie, Toy Soldiers. None of you know what movie this is. Oh, yes, you do. Oh, my God. I can't believe it. Okay. So I would watch Toy Soldiers, a bunch of boys in a boarding school. They were all kind of good looking. The school gets taken over hostage, right? The kids figure out how to take down the bad guys and save the day. All right, that was a great movie, but I wanted to be in that movie. So I would write part 2. It's the same school, the same boys. They're taken over hostage by another group of people, and I'm the only girl in the school because I went to visit my brother that day, the day they were taken over hostage. And by the end of the movie, the cute leading guy is my boyfriend. Hello, right? And so that's how I started writing. But eventually I would write poems and actual screenplays that were not off of other movies. I would write stories about teenagers trying to survive difficult circumstances. I would do all kinds of writing, but eventually that wasn't enough. And then someone named Byrne, who did pass away a few years ago from cancer, discovered me and put me in theater. And I was in my first play. And I loved it. I lived the stories. I could be an entire character for 3 months until the play was over. But it wasn't enough. I didn't want to live one story. I wanted to build the whole story. So I stepped off stage and started instead working on the craft of the stage production and directing. By the time I finished high school, I had already written, directed, produced my own play in off Broadway on 44th Street, not 42nd. But it was a wonderful run for the summer. And I didn't know that my passion for stories was going to start mapping a career pathway. And so what happened was, I finished high school, so I wasn't going to school. My play was over, so guess what? I had no job. I was living off of whatever money I had left from the play. And it was time for me to go to school or do something with my life. But my guidance counselor told me that I was never going to do well in college. I have a doctorate, by the way, but we'll get to that later. Apparently, I was lazy, and I was never going to succeed in college. But she didn't know that at home, I had a Jekyll and Hyde situation because of an addiction in the family. And she didn't know that unlike my peers, I started working at the age of 12 while going to college. So before I started high school, I had already worked a 70-hour work week. I knew what that was. And so here came a time when my mother said, "Oh, please, young lady, I did not come to this country for my children to not go to college," right? The guilt trip. Anyone has the mom guilt trip, Dominican guilt trip? All right. And I don't know if you can really live here if you're not going to go to college. I don't think so. And my boyfriend at the time, who doesn't know he's in this presentation either, so don't say anything, he actually was older. He had already gone to college. And he says, I'm so sorry. You're smarter than I am. What do you mean you're not going to college? I can't be with someone who's not going to college. And so I said, well, we have a problem. I can't be homeless and not have a boyfriend. This isn't going to work, right? So the boyfriend part was a tricky one, no? Which one's the priority, no? Not the boyfriend? So I went 3 weeks before classes started. I signed up for classes. Oh, actually, I applied to college. Let me go back. 3 weeks before classes started, I showed up at Lehman College in the Bronx, a school just like Miami-Dade. And I went to an office and I said, I graduated from high school. I'm supposed to go to college. What am I supposed to do? That's all I said. And the lady was like, fill out an application. So I filled out an application. A week later, I took my placement test. A week later, I registered for classes in an orientation. I'm looking at my team back there. And a week after that, I was in classes with other students my age, and I had no clue what I was doing. But this is how much I loved college. College was amazing. You have the freedom to take the classes you want for your pathway. You design your life. You are responsible for yourself, and I loved it. Freshman year was incredible. And someone was so smart, or high or drunk or something, and said, this lady has experience. And they waived all the core requirements for me. So I could take whatever I wanted. Can you believe that? After someone told me I couldn't even survive college. But freshman year was a little tricky because Jekyll and Hyde was going to come back. And while we were living in that family trying to make the most of it, we were going to have some tricky times. And after a difficult alcohol-infused evening that involved my father and my brother, we had to make a decision, and we had to kick him out. So freshman year, we kicked out my father, and I used stories, literature, to get through a lot of that. But we also, 6 months later, were going to take my father back in. And I had to use stories and literature to handle that situation. But when we took my father in, it turns out he wasn't sober. He was still struggling. Addiction is difficult. And that summer, we decided to take a family trip to the Dominican Republic, trying to repair the family, right? And visit our family. And if you look at this picture, my parents and my brother are on one side, and I just realized when I was putting this presentation together, I'm on the other side with a whole other family. I'm not even with my family. And that just shows you the divide that was taking place. And it was that summer that as a family, we made a decision that would change the trajectory of our lives forever. We chose to get into a car with my father to do a 3.5-hour trip from the capital to my mom's village. And we made sure that he did not have a drink that day because we were going to get in the car at 10 in the morning. The problem is addiction and alcoholism don't work that way. If you drink every day, in a few hours, that's not going to leave your system. You're still going to have an impaired judgment. You're still going to have impaired reflexes. And we still chose to get in the car. And it was in that car accident, and I had been in 6 before that. That's a whole other story. That's a different Power Story Series workshop, right? It was in that car accident for the first time that we believed we would die. And we accepted that fate. We hit a car head-on on a highway. We slid across 6 lanes of traffic coming both ways, with trucks coming at us. We almost hit a cement monument. And then we went down a cliff. And we survived. But that was the beginning of a changing dynamic. Everyone got quiet. We survived. It's okay. It's okay. We shouldn't have survived that crash. We should have flipped up in the air on the collision. We should have gone nosedive down the cliff, by the way. I still don't know how we landed upright when we got to the bottom. The Red Cross didn't come up to get us because they assumed we were dead, basically. But what happened from there was I left the Dominican Republic with my brother, let my parents resolve some messes over there, and went back to sign up for sophomore year classes. And I took 21 credits. Can you believe that? 21 credits. I wanted to immerse myself in literature. I declared English as my major, and I started taking classes. And while all this was unfolding in the behind the scenes, I was hiding in my stories, and I discovered new voices. Did you know that Dominicans write books? I did not know that until I was in college, because I went to the K-12 system with the canon. So here I am, oh my God, Julia Alvarez, she's Dominican, and she's writing books. And then I discovered Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, and then I started studying film, John Sayles, Spike Lee. Do we know these names? Some of them? Okay, good, I feel better. And then, notice the personal comes back in. So the family's unwinding, Hyde is taking over. Dr. Jekyll, the good one, I always think Jekyll's the bad one, but he's the good one, is sort of hiding behind the scenes. And I had to make a decision, and we had to go down to the courthouse in New York and get a restraining order against my father, because Hyde was winning, and he was getting violent. And again, it's all the alcohol, so that's another story. He's actually a very good person. inside. So from there, I decided I needed to go back to writing, and I immersed myself in creative writing. How many of you love to write fiction and nonfiction stories and poems, okay? So went into the world of creative writing. And as I was doing that, and you can see in the photo albums, it's just the three of us. We were working on repairing the family. We had to focus on ourselves for once, right? And eventually, we made a decision. I stayed in New York, working, going to school. My mom left to Massachusetts with my brother to start a new life. So we made that decision. And while she did that, I decided, oh crap, I need a third job because I only had two. So I went and got my third job because I had to pay my bills and started tutoring, trying to help students find their voices and come up with their stories. And from there, guess what? I loved it. And so I started teaching. And eventually, these are my students in New York. Eventually, I was just teaching and doing workshops. My third job took over. But while I was doing that, I had to rebuild my relationship with my mother because she was always there behind the scenes. But it turns out, okay, I have anger and resentment towards my father. That made sense, right? I had anger and resentment towards my mom too because she would always take him back. So for those few years, I would travel back and forth to Massachusetts to try to build a relationship with her. And eventually, I made a decision. I moved to Massachusetts. I had to be close to my mom, right? Mommy. So I went to Boston College for my master's. They paid for my tuition. The girl who wasn't going to go to college got free tuition. And during that time, I didn't live with her. I lived nearby. I immersed myself in my literature program. And guess what I learned? You can wear different sets of glasses and see a story from different angles. And I started studying a lot of theory, psychoanalysis, feminism, and applying it to the things I was reading. And I loved it, and I wanted to teach my students how to do it. So I took a full-time teaching job at Northern Essex Community College, where I taught writing for EAP students, for developmental students, for English students. I was also teaching at Boston College and tutoring, but remember, I don't know how to have just one job, right? So I have a problem. And these are some of my students. And I even started the first creative writing club at the school because I wanted students to have a voice, to be able to express themselves. And from there, I got a Carnegie Fellowship to Middlebury School of English. They paid for me to go to school for 6 weeks. And for the first time since I was 12, I got to go to school and not work at the same time. I had never known what that was like except elementary school. And for adults in the room, this is like summer camp for adults who love English and wine. It's fabulous. You're like in the middle of nowhere. You're in the middle of nowhere just reading and having wine at dinner. And while I was there, I worked with teachers from France, from Germany, from Africa, from the US as well. And we were doing projects together and doing amazing work together and looking at the impact of teaching on our students and their success and the impact that it has in the community. And I fell in love with research. So of course, what did I need to do? I had to go back to school and study what? Research. Researching the impact of what I do with students in the classroom. So I went to FIU for a doctorate in language literacy and culture, and I went to also work on 3 grants. Actually, I ended up working on 6 grants because I really wanted to look at the impact of teaching on our students and on their lives and the community. And while I was doing all this work and immersing myself in the research, something happened. What do you think happened? Who do you think it involved? Yeah, I got a call from New York. My dad was in the hospital. He had bronchitis or pneumonia, and he collapsed at home, and they had to rush him to the ER. And I said, okay, that's good to know. He's not doing well. Well, he's an alcoholic. He's going through withdrawal. He's not going to do well. And that was it. And I went to work and to school, nothing. The next day, I got another call. Your father's in ICU. His organs are shutting down. We don't know if he's going to make it. I said, okay. I canceled my party. I was going to throw a 30th party. Got on a plane, went to New York, and lo and behold, he was in the hospital. And he was going through delirium tremens. So extreme, the doctors had never seen anything like it. His organs were shutting down. They didn't think he was going to survive. He did survive. My brother and I stayed there, he did, and he was able to move on with his life. Unfortunately, he wasn't going to stay sober for as long as I had hoped. So he was sober for about 6 months, and that just kept unfolding. So what did I do? I went back to FIU. I wrote a 9-chapter dissertation. I did research. I helped the university go through its accreditation process, and because I always need more things to do when things are not going well, I got a graduate certificate in institutional research while I was doing my dissertation. I was tired, but I graduated, right? And this is Teresa Lucas. And so the story is not over, it's still unfolding, but I already have a doctorate, and what does that mean for me? So let me tell you something. You got very quiet. It's not that bad. Let's look at the good stuff. Ready? What happened to me? My passion for stories, the thing that created that hiding place for the personal things that were going on in my life, opened up amazing career opportunities. I just didn't know it at the time. And it helped me become a tutor and teach. It helped me with learning how to help institutions with accreditation. I worked on several QEPs, quality enhancement plans, where we look at something that will help students succeed and implement it at the college. It's helped me with a lot of community work. I work with a lot of foundations and nonprofits. We're going to start opening our own soon, probably like the Pena Family Foundation, focusing on Dominican Americans and helping them with educational resources. It's helped me help nonprofits open publishing arms so they can help publish books of community members. It's gotten me involved in the world of politics, of grants, micro businesses. I call them small businesses, but students have taught me that they're actually micro businesses. But being able to see a need in a community and open a business to meet those needs, and those businesses succeed over decades. And it's been an interesting time because I don't think my journey's over. So I'm turning 40 tomorrow, which is amazing. That's another Power Story series, but I didn't think I was going to live past 30. That's another one. That's a different workshop. And as I turn 40, what I've been doing this past year is doing daily reflections, a lesson that I learn each day, and thinking about that. But what happened was those daily lessons can't be divorced from the last 39 years. So what's happened is I've been looking at these lessons, and what we have are 40 years of lessons learned. And all the lessons I learn every day, I'm putting them under themes. And obviously family, friends, and there are a bunch of sub-themes under that. But there are a few lessons that I'm still going to keep learning. There are a few lessons that I still have to work on. If you're wondering where my family is right now, we could talk about that in a bit. There are a lot of lessons I've learned. One of the things I've learned in this presentation is that my professional journey has been amazing, very unexpected. And it's because of my passion for stories. But in trying to put this together and tie where that passion came from, I realized I can't divorce my personal from my professional. And a lot of times a student will see a personal situation and it becomes a challenge. And you'll turn, I could have turned to drugs. I had a marriage proposal when I was 15, by the way. I could have turned to that and got married, right, and had a kid at 16. That's a whole other story. There are a lot of things I could have done differently, but instead, using that personal journey to really fuel me to do better professionally. Not use it as a barrier, but use it as something that empowers me. And of course, I'm a little extreme. 3 jobs, let's do 2 degrees at the same time. I am a little extreme, but it really helped me get through a lot of challenges. And by the way, the story's not over. My father lives in Florida. He's doing really well right now. I'll be visiting him soon. My mom, eventually I got her to move to Miami. This is her first year here. And of course, mommy, I built my house right next to her, so I literally moved next to her. My brother has 2 kids and is living in Massachusetts and has his own business. So we're doing okay. We're doing okay, but the journey's not over, right? The Jekyll and Hyde situation will emerge again, but we understand what it means and how to deal with it. So I've talked for quite a bit. I don't have a watch. I forgot my watch. We're doing good. And so you have a worksheet, and I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about the lessons that you think I learned through this process, but I want to hear a little bit about the lessons you've learned as well. If anyone would like to share, we do have wireless mics, and we are going to also do some questions in a bit. But what are some lessons that you think I learned through this journey? Let's use me. You can pick on me. Perseverance. What else? Compassion for others. Resiliency. What else? Strength. Forgiveness. That's a big one. Forgiveness has been tough. but it was a very good lesson. What else? Acceptance. That's a good one, yes. And I think that's very challenging, but yeah, acceptance. Acceptance and forgiveness. Love. Because no matter what, I love all the people in that picture, right? I think the picture is this way, sorry. Right? What else? Patience. That's a good one. Patience. Balance is hard because I am my mother's daughter, and we both have a lot of energy. So there is balance. I had balance for a bit. I'm going to grab my phone so I can see the time. I'm sorry, Evelyn, because I forgot where my watch. But I'm going to share another personal story. I did have some balance, and I did get married and everything else, and I tried to live the world of balance. But very interesting and ironic, my ex-husband is a recovering meth addict. And so that happened after our separation, but what I learned through this process helped me figure out when I needed to move on. And I had some balance, and then I kind of delved into the lack of balance, but then I'm coming back. So I was in the Dominican Republic this weekend, eating fried fish at the beach. One of my favorite things. Anything else? What other lessons?
I'm just wondering what lesson you talked about the story a bit from characters in the story and their stories that help along the path. You talked about the love, you find some of your own life in that. Read a lot of stories. So I'm just wondering story or story that
Wow. I might not be able to tell you my favorite story, but I'm going to go back to the Julia Alvarez story and how the Garcia girls lost their accent. It was the first time I read a story that a Dominican person wrote. Because remember, I was sheltered. The K-12 system, it was the canon. But what was important for me is that I always struggled with my identity, with family, and with love. And with that story, number one, my Dominican American identity. So let me tell you a story. If I go to a Dominican and I tell a Dominican that I'm Dominican, the Dominican will say, I don't think so, you're not Dominican. So if I go to an American person and tell an American that I'm an American, whatever American means to you, the American will say, I don't think so. You have an accent and you dance bachata or Latin, I don't know what it is, you're not American. So I grew up with an identity crisis of myself. Along with the Jekyll and Hyde situation, I had a cultural identity crisis that I had to come to grips, and even today, I still struggle with it. And I decided I am Dominican American hyphenated, because I can't separate the two. They're both part of me. And a book like the Julia Alvarez book really helped me understand what were some of those cultural challenges I was having. My mom was trying to raise me like if I was still in the village in the Dominican Republic. But I was living in the Bronx. And I was hanging out in the Heights. And when I was 12, I was hanging out having wine coolers with drug dealers. And my friend got pregnant when she was 13. So, well, she thought I was playing inside the house, but that's another story. So I had my own challenges of trying to figure things out, and I could have gone in a different way with that identity crisis, but a lot of these books helped me figure that out. And family. I didn't really grow up, my mom loves us very much, but she grew up very isolated. She grew up with a family that wasn't her own family. And so we didn't grow up with all the hugs and all the love, and I wasn't mushy. I'm not mushy in that sense. And so trying to understand love and family and those things, I learned a lot of that from literature as well. It's a good story. Anything else? We can jump right into Q&A. So what questions do you have for me? Or what lessons do you feel you're learning from this process? Either one, I'll take it. It was very nice, actually. I went to every Oh, say it again? Sorry, Evelyn? Oh, how did you feel when you graduated with your doctorate? Thank you. I can give it to you. I apologize. But it was really nice. I actually finished, my chair made me finish my doctorate because he was living in Africa for a year. No offense to my Miami-Dade College people, but when he found out I was coming to Miami-Dade College, and leaving FIU, he said, oh no, girl, give me chapter 9 in 1 week, we are graduating you, because he felt that I wasn't going to be able to graduate once I hit in deep into this job. And so when I graduated, he wasn't there. Teresa Lucas was there, but he did everything he could via Skype, but it felt great. My brother flew in, my mom flew in. My husband, I was still married, was there. And I didn't think of it at that time, but you know, what an amazing feat after someone told you couldn't even go to college. But at that time, I live in the moment, so at that time I wasn't really thinking about that. Looking back, it just shows you that no matter what, you can meet your goals. Maybe I didn't meet it the way I thought, but you can meet your goals. What else? Questions? Anything? Open book for a few more minutes. Do I have other hobbies? Okay, so I love dancing. Technically for me, small businesses is a hobby. I know that sounds really weird. I do a lot of small business stuff, and I help, you know, very behind the scenes. That's a good question. I used to love singing and dancing. I did a lot of dancing for a while, tap and all that. I think I live in the moment too much, and I'm more about the hobbies at a moment, and I get into something, and then I want to learn something new. I've done stained glass, I've done drawing, I've done painting. I love to travel. I went hiking in Kauai in October, which was really great. Again, I was in the Dominican Republic for 2 days. Not a lot of normal people do that, but I had to go help someone out, and then went to the beach, that kind of thing. And for me, a lot is family. Trying to spend as much time as I can with family. I also helped raise a lot of kids. Now they're not kids. I still call them kids. You would be offended because they're in their 20s and 30s. And some of them have kids of their own, but I did help raise a lot of kids. And so a lot of it is guiding them, making sure they finish college. I'm planning a wedding for one of them. I just married one of them in my backyard the other day. I don't know how I got 115 people in my backyard, but we did it. So that family is really my main hobby, I think. What else? No, I don't think I was very good as an actress, actually. I think I kind of sucked in that area, but it was fun. I did make money. When I needed money, I was Spanish girl number 2 in Law and Order. So, you know, you walk across a campus for 8 hours, and you get $100. It's amazing. And I was underage, so they had to pay me union rates. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you find that you tend to overcompensate, that you're so worried about that. Like, obviously, kids sometimes they didn't have an alcohol problem, but ended up having other issues.
After our separation, yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting. I think that experience taught me a lot. I'm not sure how I pick men. I'm going to be honest, I grew up as the runner, right? So I would start hanging out with a guy. This is going to be a true story. I would hang out with a guy. We would spend a lot of time together, and then I noticed we went away together. And then I noticed that there's a toothbrush in the bathroom, and then a pair of socks in a drawer, and the next thing you know, he wouldn't see me for 3 months. So when it came to building strong relationships with men or women, I was a runner. I actually did not have a lot of relationships with women, which is, I think, the interesting part. Most of my friends are men. Not romantically wrong, but now is that I'm having more and more friendships with women. So I think that's another interesting part that plays with the cultural piece, men versus women. I couldn't go to the store because I was a woman, but my uncle, who was my same age, could go to the store and could go out with friends. It was like very, very strange culturally there in terms of men and women and roles. So that's a good question, something for me to think more about. Anything else? Yes. So one of my passions right now, I'm just checking on time, so I'm going to keep my phone in my hand. We're doing really good. I'm surprised. One of the things I've found, one of my passions right now is working with 2 nonprofits. One of them is called Pedal for Hope. It's cyclists who raise funds to help in focusing on education or young people in the community, children in the community. And the other one is the Gravelers. And the Gravelers are a group of cyclists, I do not ride a bike. Don't ask me how I got involved. But we do 2 fundraisers a year, and we use that money to buy book bags, school supplies, toys, and we get shoes and clothes donated, and we go to the remote areas in the Dominican Republic, the areas where there's no immigration patterns, so there's no movement of information or resources, and we go to those remote areas, and Evelyn cries because we have to cross rivers and see if we can go through a bridge that has collapsed with our vehicles and do all kinds of things to get to these areas and give out the school supplies and the clothes and the toys. And this year in February, we touched about 1,600 children. We do the same here in Miami as well. So that, and then I just connect with nonprofits that I'm passionate about the work they're doing and see how we can keep working together. Yeah. What else, Nancy?
What do you think that makes you and makes others take the positive road, the high road, instead of going?
I know, that picture with that smile, it looks like I'm like high or crazy when I was in college, is sort of how I feel. I don't know how that happened, but I think a lot has to do with my mother. She sheltered us a lot. When things got a little bit too loud or inappropriate, she did the best to shelter us. One time I was going to the Dominican Republic. I used to go for the whole summer. I was 12, and my dad showed up, and he was very drunk and violent. I didn't get to see it because what she did was she took me out the back downstairs so I could sleep in my aunt's room downstairs, and she handled the situation. She was very good, and she made it seem like, oh, your aunt wants to spend time with you, sleep with her. So she was very good about sheltering us as much as she could. Until it got to a point where she couldn't. She always tried to create a positive environment. I think that, and I think perseverance. So one of the things my mom did was she made sure to come to the U.S. and be a citizen. That's a lot of work, right? Don't you agree? That's a lot. That's very powerful. But then she made sure to help every single family member get residency and come to the U.S., get a visa. She reunited all her brothers and sisters who were raised by other families and her biological parents here in the U.S., all of them. One of them was raised by a family and didn't realize that she wasn't really their daughter. Everyone else understood the situation, and she did what she could in that sense. I think that power and that passion and that positive outlook and trying to create that happy home environment, I think that helped a lot. Yeah. Yeah, actually, what happens is you want to do the best for everyone. And so there's this notion of we need to do this for the children. And there's this belief that we need to, there are two things. You have a love for this person. You love this person so much that you really are hoping that this person can be Jekyll, the good person, not Hyde. And you really want to help that person, because we all have our challenges, but some fall more towards the Hyde and have a hard time coming out to the more positive side. But then a lot of times we focus on our children. So if you have children, you want to do everything you can for your children. And so what happens is you take him back, hoping you can have that family and that life for your children. And then you go to Sears and you take this picture because you want to make sure you frame the time. Sears is where you want to take family portraits. You frame this because there's a time when you're a family, and you hope that this is who you can be the whole time, but it doesn't work out. And by the way, she talks to him a lot more than I do. So this is a good person. This is just a good person with flaws, and he chose one thing over us and wasn't strong enough to choose us more or a different life or see a different life. And a lot of times there's some personal things going on. So we don't know if he has issues with confidence. We don't know if he has mental health issues. Mental health issues do not exist in the Dominican Republic. Let me explain. And that is true in many countries, right? This notion of clinical depression, for example, ¿qué te pasa, mijo, right? What's wrong with you? Go work in the fields. Oh, no. Go do this. We don't understand that mental health is real in many of our countries, so we don't know what else is behind the scenes in this situation. Anything? You still have me for a few minutes to ask anything you want, but once we're out these doors, that's another story. It's all about your classes, your degrees, and your graduation. Okay? Yes. I don't have children. I didn't have children in my marriage. I am turning 40 tomorrow, so I know miracles can happen when you're 50, but I don't think I want a miracle at 50. Actually, it's interesting because I'm actually exploring options right now as to whether or not that will be possible or whether I will adopt children, because I have a home. I have a lot of space. I have a lot of love. I have a lot of resources. But I get a feeling my children are going to start having children, and I might be babysitting a lot. Now I just babysit a lot of dogs because they all have dogs, right? That's the new first child when you're in a relationship. I've had so many dog sitting days this year alone, from 65 pounds to 10 pounds. But I get a feeling the children will be next. but we didn't. And also, I chose not to at some point in the marriage because I didn't know how things were going to work out. Addiction came up after we were separated, but I didn't know how things were going to work out. And I didn't want to have children in a relationship where I didn't know if I was going to encounter a Jekyll and Hyde situation or some other issues. So I chose not to for a bit. Okay. Yes? Do I plan to get, if you find me a good man that can put up with my energy problems, I'm in there. Yeah. So I have been in very many interesting relationships since then, but yeah, I think I'm getting very picky now. Very picky. Yeah. And I enjoy my adventures. I like being able to go visit my brother for 2 days and come back on Monday to go to work.
Isn't it good for you to be like alone?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I didn't know what it was like to not be with someone. Have any of you experienced that? So I was that weird girl that I would run away from one relationship or break up with a guy, and for some reason there was always 2 other people outside my door. So I was never alone until after I got separated. I was in one more relationship, kind of relationship, and then I was alone. And so these are the first years where I am, well, I have, I date, I see people, but these are the first years where I'm not in a relationship. And and it's great. I'm still the same person. I still enjoy my freedom, but I was one of those weird people, I'm 19, I break up with one guy for some reason. Well, we weren't really dating. Okay, I don't really date. They weren't boyfriends. That's a whole other story. But I'm not with one person. The next thing I know, I'm seeing someone else. All of a sudden, my neighbor is my boy, my something. And so now I am enjoying a lot of that freedom these last half decade or so. Yeah, it's nice to be able to get on a plane and go see your family, have fried fish at the beach, and hop on a plane and come back to work. And Evelyn's telling me it's time. Stop talking about the Dominican Republic. I got it. Anything else for me? I know some of you have to go to class. It is 10:52. What I can do is take one more question if you have one. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is 2 things. Number 1, you have a yellow sheet that's for me. Because in this conversation, there's a lot that I'm learning through this process. And I would love to see how you see it through your eyes. The green sheet is for you. That's where you put the stuff that you don't want to share with me. Number 2, I'm not running away from you. I am staying in this room. I can answer questions, have conversations. I'm here for you. I rarely do this. Actually, I've never talked about this personal story before to this extent in a large group. So I'm really here for you. I'm open for you so that we can learn together. But then I'm going to go back to being your dean and telling you, hey, did you take that class? Are you graduating? And ma'am, I better see you walk across the stage. I'm going to be that person once we get out of this room. So give me your yellow sheets. You can leave them in the back on the table or give them to Evelyn before you leave. I'm going to take one more question if you have one. And stay behind if you want to keep talking with me.
Happy? Are you really happy with what you do, or would you rather be like a famous writer, film writer, whatever?
Okay, so I actually don't like the spotlight. So that's another reason why this is a little rare. I love what I do. I truly found my passion through stories in the world of education, and this is what I always see myself doing. But I think at one day I might diversify and do a couple of, with work-life balance, and do a couple of things. But I love what I do, and I do want to go back to writing. I've been doing a lot of writing. Lately, trying to get back into the spirit of things and see what kinds of books I can produce. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah? Professor Raspas?
Okay, everybody, that's a happy birthday to you today. Count 3. 1, 2, 3. Hit it. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear
Thank you. This might be the biggest birthday party I've ever had, by the way.